we get awfully caught up sometimes in the rearview mirror, who we were supposed to be, who we weren't. Look forward, be optimistic, because wherever you are today, whatever you're doing right now, you can change.
Brilliance and magic that happens when we're just goofing around.
That's exactly what happened with yours and mine. I mean, we talked for like 40 minutes before we kicked in. I was like, why didn't I click record?
Yeah. Any particular goals or questions you have before we dive in today, Mike?
No, man, just rock and roll. I mean, I love talking about the whole world we talked about and everything beyond that. You might notice right above my head, there's a new edition on one of the books.
I see trust. I see. Oh, nice. Appreciate it. I love it. I love it up there. I'm looking for, I'm a book fanatic. So awesome. That is super cool, man. Super cool.
There it is.
Are you an eternal optimist?
I don't know. I actually just started it. I'm actually going away in a week and a half. I invested some time and money into myself and going to take a 3-day speaker conference.
Nice.
So I'll be down in Atlanta, Georgia for 3 days and learning that fun new world. And
hell yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Who's the teacher of this speakers conference?
William Winfield. He was actually a guest on the show, and he's got quite a speaking business going on. The best part of all of this is I am probably going to be the token white guy in the room, which is fun. Yep, absolutely. And that's
is that okay to say? Token white guy?
And that, it's going to be amazing because, it's awesome it's great to be around people that, you want to strive to be, but it's also great to be around people that have totally different approaches to how they do things, totally different audiences that they tend to speak to. So I'm beyond excited.
Heck yeah.
Beyond excited.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm excited to ask you about that. So I'll maybe ask you about that today, and let's see. So speaking, and of course, I like to ask about the greatest challenges you've ever encountered, endured, trying to overcome, working through. Yeah. So ask you about some challenges, something about the vision for the future, and we get to near the wrap up. I'll ask you, where can we find you? Like, what are your social media places, website, that kind of thing. Cool. And then wrap up the lightning round, and we're out of here. I'm looking for 35 to 50 minutes of just us jamming. I don't care if you talk the whole time or if it's back and forth, just whatever, wherever we go, wherever the flow goes.
Sounds good to me.
There's nothing off limits, and if you cuss, we'll bleep it. So feel free to just say talk however you want to normally talk.
Perfect.
Cool.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll kick off, and just to make sure, it's Fancher. Is that right, Fancher?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. Well, I'll kick us off and ask you. So, Mike, give us an introduction for some context. Who is Mike Fancher? And that is the place just to share a couple high-level bullet points about you, and we will promote. Is there anything particular you want to promote today? Anything you're
No. You know what? If we were a month later from now, I'd say yes. So I've taken your advice, and
you got the Swedish penis enlargement pump.
I did. You know what? I got the same one that Austin Powers has. It's fantastic.
Okay. Got it. If this is on the recording team, that was just a really good piece of advice.
That's going to be the clip that's on social media. There it is, right there. No, I've been diving into this whole world of distraction, and I spend a lot of time helping people manage their distractions. Everyone talks about, I need to learn more in my business. I need to do more. I need to stay focused. I need to be consistent. I need to go in 100% all the time. But what is the one thing that always, sidelines all of that? And it's distraction.
Yeah.
So I am working on a one-on-one or a group coaching type situation. I have titled it MindFit Mastery. and it is going to focus on working with people through distraction. So I'm about done creating my 3D one sheet, which looks at a person's directions, their disruptions, and their distractions, to see what is really holding them back. And 9 times out of 10, it's usually things that they're doing, not things that are happening around them. So you and I had kind of talked about you should really look into the coaching world, and I took that to heart.
Good.
I finished your recommendation of a book, Tribe of Millionaires, in one day. And to your point, changed my life and the viewpoint of how I look at all this and what I'm trying to do, hence going to Atlanta, hence doing the things that I'm going to be doing. So I appreciate the episode that I had on the MindFit Method podcast with you, because I certainly got a heck of a lot out of it and have already been taking the action since then.
I can't wait to sit back and relax and chat about this in the future in, let's say, 3 years' time from now. Yep. And see exactly where it is. And it's interesting because you just shared something I'm going to use in my coaching practice. So kind of workshopping this. You talked about distraction, and I made a drawing, or I'm going to finish the drawing. Distraction plus procrastination equals inner peace for some. For people like us who are driven, who want to have this impact, who want to build something, then distraction plus procrastination equals a numbing, slow death, and likely to lead to regret.
Yes.
Or throwing the towel at some point.
Distraction is actually the kryptonite of consistency.
Okay.
So
did you just come up with that now, or is that something you've been sharing for a while?
That's something I came up on a 6-mile ruck walk 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote that, and I'm gonna just use your name on that. That's a Mike. I'm not going to hijack that. That would not be ethical to hijack other people's awesome quotes. Distraction is the kryptonite. Say it again. Distraction is the kryptonite.
Distraction is the kryptonite of consistency.
Whew. Heck yeah. That's a good one. Well, so I'm sitting there this morning and I'm doing some deep thinking, the kind of thinking that when you're facilitating an event for a bunch of CEOs in the room who are, $10 to $60 million a year CEOs, I can't just wing it.
Right.
That doesn't work. It doesn't work. It works for brand new owners who are just getting to their first 7-figure mark, but it doesn't work for the upper, higher level game. It takes what Cal Newport would call deep work. So the deep work for me was sitting down this morning for 2.5 hours and thinking about what's the one question that when we come up with this, it's going to give them the best payback at this event. I'm facilitating up in New Jersey in a couple weeks. And the question, it didn't just come to me in 2 seconds. It's something you write it down and then you work through, is this that's going to help us get to where these people want to go? And it takes deep work. So I love your idea of, distractions, kryptonite of consistency. I love your idea. Just how do you beat distraction? And I call beating distraction as just remove all the electronics in the room, sit there, just you, yourself, your journal, and think. And that was what we did this morning. Came up with a big event. So I think that's my response. That's just what came out of the brain when you talk about distraction. It is the kryptonite. It is the kryptonite. Yeah.
I think that social media is obviously for most people today probably the biggest form of distraction, but there's a lot of others. And honestly, sometimes our biggest distractions are what we view as productivity. So I'll give you an example. We often create our own implied constraints.
Okay.
So when person's starting a brand new business, they're putting everything together and then they start stressing, right? They start thinking about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when I have 1,000 clients? How am I going to handle all this? What am I going to do? I better start researching and learning this new online tool to be able to handle that load, except they don't have a customer yet.
Yeah.
Right. So we often create our own implied constraints. What we should be doing, yes, it's nice to project when we're going to run into an issue and try to head those off at the past. But for people that are just starting that process of initiating action, right, and taking steps towards moving something, too many times we start planning for things that never happen, right? It's like we worry about things that never actually happen. We start planning for things that never happen because we're not ready for that yet. So I went through this in my own situation right now as I've been really gearing up to do a lot more keynote speaking and speaking at companies in regards to, yes, distraction, but also in regards to how does someone prime their brain for learning? How does someone prime their brain for productivity and innovation and creativity? And I caught myself doing the exact same thing. I'm like, okay, how am I going to handle this? I still work full time in the healthcare world, and now I'm going to be doing the speaking. And oh my gosh, like I really want to hit 4 or 5, opportunities per month that I'm actually speaking. And how am I going to handle all this? And at the same time, I'm thinking, how many do you have booked right now, Mike? Right? How many do you have booked for July right now? The answer was 0.
Yeah.
So let's go back. Let's initiate the process of what do we need to do to initiate the leads and going through that sales process. Once you get to that problem that you have all of a sudden 5 booked in a month and you start stressing and you're wondering, how am I going to go from there? Then you deal with that. But otherwise, trying to fix problems that don't yet exist is a distraction. Learning can be a distraction, right? I did this so much in my first business. When I opened MindFit USA, I had a 5,000 square foot facility. It was half fitness, half STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So I essentially worked young kids from the age of 5 up through 14 through a high intensity exercise program that lasted 8 to 14 minutes. I then had about 5 to 7 minutes of downtime in what I called a decompression room, which kind of looked like a classroom, giant TV on the wall. I would show an inspirational or motivational or educational video on the screen for about 5 to 7 minutes. The main reason I did that was I needed to find a way to transfer a hot, sweaty, and completely out of breath child who just worked their butt off on the fitness side that was somewhere between the ages of 5 and 14, so they're young, to then using computers, 3D printers, robotics, aquaponics, hydroponics, drones, green screen, everything that we were doing in MindFit. And so we, go into this little room, looks like a classroom. It allows their heart to come back down to steady state. So they're not so hot, sweaty, and out of breath. Then they're going in, their brains are primed for learning at that point, and their innovation, their creativity was off the charts. It was unbelievable. But when I started the business, I had this amazing idea that I could do this entire thing on my own. Till it was an amazing idea, right? Then it became a different problem. So, the first thing I did as I started my own company was, I couldn't wait to get those business cards printed that said Mike Fancher, CEO, MindFit USA, right?
Yes.
Couldn't wait for that. I didn't spend a whole lot of time doing CEO things. I spent a whole lot of time building curriculum, building the building itself. I built the entire inside of a 5,000 square foot facility out. I built all the the desks and everything that was in there. I built everything out. So I'm doing all these things that made me feel unbelievably productive. But if I had invested a little bit of money, what I should have been doing was thinking about, what am I doing to make sure that our sales process is ready to go, that our fulfillment process is ready to go, all of those things. Right?
Yes.
But I learned a lot. I learned a lot how to run Facebook ads. I learned a lot how to sweep floors, because honestly, I was the janitor too. Let's be honest, I'm all of it. And then you start realizing, you know what? I'm learning all these things. And I'll never forget who said this. Believe it was Russell Brunson who once said it. Most people are very, very good at 1 or 2 things, and they're mediocre at best at everything else. Right? But you get trapped into this idea of, if I can just learn a little bit more, then I can do everything. I can be the CEO. I'll be the CEO from 9:01 a.m. to 9:09 a.m. And then I'm just going to do everything else the rest of the day. It doesn't work that way. Right? So distraction is probably, even if you're a $60 million business, right? I work in the healthcare world. What is the cost of distraction in your business? What is the cost of distraction in healthcare? Okay. I witnessed one day on a step-down ICU unit in a hospital. I witnessed a nurse, and this is not ripping apart nurses in any way. Let me be very clear, because this is what happens in every single industry today. This is just an example. I watched a nurse who was sitting at her computer station, which was about 10 feet outside the door of one of her patients. And she was engrossed in what I believe was a YouTube video.
Okay.
And I walked past her probably 8 or 9 times over the course of 40 minutes, and she never moved. Right? She sat there the entire time holding her phone, watching her video.
Okay.
And suddenly, one of her patients started to have a rapid response, meaning they're just shy of a code blue. And I watched a respiratory therapist run in the room. I watched a different nurse run in the room. This is that nurse's patient. And as a doctor went to run into the room, the doctor brushed her on her shoulder, took the corner too fast and brushed her. And she looked up at that point, absolutely annoyed that she had been bothered, and said, "Really?" And the charge nurse that was sitting at the nurse's station said, "Yes, really. Your patient is coding." Right? What is the cost of distraction?
Wow.
So if you start thinking about that at whatever your business is, if you are if you run a $10 million business, and that's fantastic, and you're trying to get to 20 million, do you need to add things to what you're doing to get to that 20 million? Or is the first thing you need to address is the distractions that are preventing you from growing from where you already are? Right?
Question.
Fair question.
Very fair.
So whatever business you're in, what's the distraction of an elementary school teacher? Right? What is the ripple effect distraction of an elementary school teacher that actually isn't teaching kids to the best of their ability, that now is going to follow those kids throughout all their years of school? Right? Distraction is probably something that we don't like to talk about, because we also use distraction as a coping mechanism.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
You have a really hard day and you're coming home and you just want to be able to sit down and let everything disappear, right? Make it all disappear. That's okay. And there are absolute times for that. There's nothing wrong with that at all, because you do need to recharge. You do need to make sure that you're performing. And if that involves downtime for you, and your downtime is, I want to go spend an hour in Instagram Reels for a while and just do mindless stuff for a while, great. But there's a time and a place for that.
Yeah.
Right. In the rest of the day, what is the distraction? What is the cost of the distraction?
Now, I'm curious about what the cost of distraction is for you, because I understand everything you're sharing and I see it through my own lens. I see it in my business and my life, and I'm starting to do kind of a mental audit of the places that I'm distracted. And, I think you and I, we are somewhat teachers in this space of helping people to overcome this. I wonder what your relationship is with distraction, Mike, and if you could trace back for us, has there been a point where this has been a real challenge for you in your career?
100%, especially post having to close MindFit as a brick and mortar. So MindFit was an unbelievable facility. We did unbelievable things for the kids there. I actually had the opportunity to work with over 1,000 kids personally myself in the time that I was there. And then COVID killed it. Right? That was probably one of my biggest points of distraction for multiple reasons. Number one, I was broken. That was my baby.
Yeah.
Right. I built it from nothing. It was nothing more than a concept. We turned it into a multiple 6-digit business within the first year. And it was incredible. All of a sudden it had to close. And my emotions, my pride, my ego became huge distractions. What should I have done in that moment? I should have figured out a way to turn everything into an online program. I had a huge homeschool program. I remember actually at one point having a group of moms come in they all homeschooled their kids, and they wanted to know if I would do a midday program for MindFit to be able to, have a homeschool program. And the funny part is that I said no, because I'm like, it's just not how I see MindFit. I see it as an after school program. And I told them, I don't want your money. I don't really want to do this. No. They came back the next day, no exaggeration, and asked me again. And I told them no a second time. They came back the third day and they said, look, now they gave me a proposal. If we could guarantee 12 kids, would you do 2 days a week of classes for 12 kids? You just tell us what the price is. We'll tell you if we can make it work. So I'm thinking it's an hour and a half long class, right? What am I doing? So I kind of gave a number, I'm not going to lie, that I thought would make them go away, right? Because it really wasn't what I saw the business being.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And they said, okay, so we'll let you know. And they called me back the next morning and they said, would you be willing to do another class? And I'm thinking, I already offered 2 days a week for classes. Like, now you're asking for 3. And I was a little annoyed, right? Because I'm not listening. And I was like, honestly, no. And they're like, well, the problem is we have 24 kids already signed up. And you said 12. So we're wondering if we could do a second class. I'm like, oh, you mean an entirely separate section? And you all know the price I gave you, right? And they were like, yeah, we're good. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Well, my expectations of having a class of 12 turned into a program that had 90 kids enrolled in a matter of a very short amount of time.
Okay.
Right? It did amazing. Why didn't I take that concept when I had to shut the building and build off of that? Because I was distracted. I was distracted by emotions. I was distracted by, this is not what it was supposed to be. I was distracted by victim mentality of, look what happened to me. This isn't fair. All of that. And so distraction absolutely affects me. And it's part of the thing that I still use to this day to try to say, you need to understand where the voices in your head are coming from. What I mean by that is, when I was 17 years old, I was in a car accident that almost killed me. That car accident to this day has left me with a total hip replacement that I had done at the age of 22. It was the youngest hip ever done in New Jersey. And
I don't know if that's the exact thing I want to be remembered for, but okay. Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I had a brutal car accident. I was broadsided at 65 miles an hour.
Oh.
I was in a little red Dodge Daytona. It's a little red sports car. And I was broadsided by a Jeep Wrangler. And I will tell you, the Jeep won. I did not. So my driver's side door was bent 3/4 away across my steering wheel. I should have died that night. And they hit me at about 65 miles an hour. So I should have died. I was very fortunate in a way. The girlfriend that I had at the time, we had double dated that night. And the guy that we had double dated with was an EMT. So he gets in through the passenger side of the vehicle. He gets behind me in the car and supporting my head, because they had no idea what the impact, what type of trauma I had going on. The glass shattered in my face. So I wound up having 110 stitches in my face, which I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a huge scar here on my face. And I had ulnar nerve damage in my hand, but all that was kind of superficial, right? So he's asking me, can you move your right arm? Can you move your left arm? But he's holding my head. He didn't want me to move my head because I didn't know what was going on there.
Okay.
He said, can you move your right leg? And I kind of lifted my leg up a little bit. I was like, yeah, man, I'm fine. He goes, can you move your left leg? And I went to move my left leg and the searing pain goes through my body, right? And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, that hurt. He's like, okay. So the door was so bent into the car that they couldn't use the jaws of life to cut me out. They had to get me out through the passenger side. And days later, he came to visit me. And he's like, what do you remember? And I honestly don't remember a whole lot. I remember being cold. I remember being confused. I remember it was a rainy night. So I remember being, damp. And I said, I do have a question for you. I said, who was screaming? And he kind of looked at me with a puzzled look on his face. He goes, what? I said, who was screaming? I said, I heard someone screaming and I've never heard that voice before. So I was assuming it was the driver of the other vehicle. And he said, that was you. I said, what? He goes, when we pulled you out of the passenger side of the car, because you're on the driver's side, your left foot, which your hip was broken, got stuck on the steering wheel. He goes, and Mike, you let out a scream like no one I've ever heard. I remember the scream. I don't remember me doing it.
Okay. Whew.
The lesson that I've taken away from that is that there's a lot of voices in our heads, right? Sometimes those voices are our own internal people talking to ourselves. Sometimes it's things that people have said to us. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. All those things that, you can't do this. You can't do that. Pay attention to whose voice is in your head, right? It made me realize you don't always know where that voice is coming from. So when you have those situations that you want to move forward, you want to try to better yourself, and then all of a sudden that self-doubt comes in, where's the self-doubt coming from? Because that self-doubt is a distraction. It's someone distracting you. Sometimes it's you. Sometimes it's what someone said to you a long time ago of how you can be, why you can't move forward when actually you can.
Man. Well, I want to just pay homage to you for sharing the story, surviving. I'm feeling a visceral pain as you're sharing this because I was in a very similar accident 7 days after 9/11 in 2001. Got hit, but it wasn't 65 miles an hour. It was only about 25 to 35 miles an hour.
Still hurts.
Yeah, but they hit about this far behind me in the back seat. So the dent in the car was like you described. It wasn't 3/4 of the way past the steering wheel. It was maybe the dent was just about this much in.
Yep.
So it wasn't going to, it didn't kill anyone and no one got really badly injured other than seatbelt rash. So we lucked out totally. But as you're sharing the story, just 65 miles an hour, your leg stuck, the scream, just the, And by the way, beautiful face. I can't tell that you have a scar on your face at all. I mean, I'm so clued in on the energy that you're sharing and this awesome message. I didn't notice any scar, but man.
What's crazy is that a very good friend of mine passed the accident scene that night. And everybody knew my car. I had a bright red Dodge Daytona turbo thing. Right?
I bet, man. I could spot that car right now. Yeah, I know the exact car you're talking about. Yeah.
I had bought the car off my father, who, made sure that I spent whatever the Kelley Blue Book value was of the car. That's what I had to buy him for. Right. That's just how my dad was, right? Going up as a kid. And that was my pride and joy. So one of my closest friends drove past the accident scene that night. And he confessed to me crying weeks later, literally crying. He goes, Mike, I have to tell you something. He goes, I drove past that accident scene that night and I said out loud, whoever's in that car is dead. He goes, I didn't know it was you. I'm so sorry. I'm like, dude, there's nothing to be sorry about, right? Number one, you didn't know it was me. Number two, you were just making an assessment of a situation. So it's okay. But, and honestly, that was the first time that I learned what I have phrased many times before. It's actually a keynote speech that I give called The Power in the Pivot. So we all have plans. We all have paths that we think we're on, right? Mike Tyson said it best. Everyone has a plan until they step into the ring and they get punched in the face, right?
Yeah.
That was the first time I got punched in the face. Not just because of the accident itself, but I was all signed up to go in the military. I had no intention of going to college. My dad worked in law enforcement. My dad was a chief, and that's the world I wanted to go into. So I was all signed up to go in the Army as an MP. And then suddenly I break my leg. So when I first break it, they have to put a plate, a pin, and 4 screws into my leg. And February of my senior year of high school, all of a sudden the recruiter doesn't really want to talk to me anymore. Right? It's a guy I talked to many, many times. And he finally comes to a recruitment day at our high school. It's February of my senior year. No college applications in, nothing. And he says, he walks past me and I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, how are you? And nothing. So finally I wound up cornering him in a room. Right? I was like, look, man, I'm good. Like, I'm perfectly fine. It's all okay. Because we had talked about the accident. We had talked about the hardware that was in me. There was supposedly no issue. And he goes, yeah, man, no, you're good. He goes, we just got to get all that hardware out of your leg. I said, well, that's part of me now. That's not coming out.
Yeah.
And he looked me dead in the eye, stood directly in front of me, looked me dead in the eye, and he said, "Well, son, thanks, but no thanks. You're a liability now." So here I am, a senior in high school, right? The path was already set. The plan was set.
Wow.
And I'm like, but wait, what do you mean? That's no, right? And I remember going home that night and telling my parents what happened. And they just they didn't really say much. They kind of took it in. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 17 years old, 18 years old at that point. And I'm like, what am I doing? And the next morning, maybe it was 2 mornings in transparency. I can't quite remember. It's been a long time. 40 some years ago at this point, by the way. But
get out of Dodge.
Yep.
Wow, that's such a long time, but you don't, I love your youthful energy and you can recall and tell the story. But damn, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So my dad says to me a couple days later, "So what's the plan?" And I was furious with him. I'm like, can't I just wallow in my sorrow for a little bit? I don't know what the plan. I have no idea. He goes, "You're going to have to work on one." And it was kind of this kick in the butt. And I guess I do, but I didn't even want to think about it at that point.
Yeah.
That was the first time I really had to pivot. And it was the first of many times. I've had so many different times in my life where the roller coaster was going along really well. There was no problems. And all of a sudden, there was no more track.
Wow.
And you have to pivot. It happened to me early on in my career. I worked in the financial industry and, at a very young age, developed a lot of success. I became very good at what I did. Started earning six digits early on in my 20s, doing a job that I truly loved. And what people don't realize is that inside of the Obamacare bill is another bill. So I worked in the securitization markets for the student loan industry. My clients were colleges all across the eastern part of the United States. And there's a bill inside the Obamacare bill because the Obamacare bill, in order to get passed, had to show that it was going to initiate $4 billion in savings in the first year in order to get passed. Well, it couldn't do that. So they hid a bill inside the bill, which now prevented banks and lenders from doing student loans. So essentially, now you had to take out your student loans, your Stafford loans, your PLUS loans directly from the Treasury. You could no longer take it out from your local Citibank or Chase or PNC or whatever it was. So me and 30,000 of my closest friends all lost our jobs. So it was like, okay, this isn't good. And oh, by the way, that's right about the time that the Great Recession hit and the financial markets fell apart. So now trying to move in the financial world from one job to another, it isn't happening. I was finishing my MBA at the time. And in my class was the CEO of a small hospital system.
Okay.
And I had to give a presentation on sales and marketing. And I finished the class that day and he walked up to me and said, "Hey, did I hear you're looking for a job?" I said, "I am." And he's like, "Well, I need someone. Would you be willing to work in healthcare?" And I was like, "No, I'm a financial guy. I don't deal with that healthcare stuff."
Ooh.
Right? But I needed a job.
Okay.
So I took it. And I remember walking in on day one and saying, 3 months. I'll find a real job in 3 months. I'll just do this for now. 15 years later to this day, I'm still working in that industry. Right. But I had to pivot.
Yeah.
Then, in 2017 was when I actually left the industry to open MindFit as a facility. Was when I started my own company. COVID kills it. You have to pivot. Right. So there's a lot of things that, you're forced to pivot in life. So many different ways. And you kind of have to get used to it in a way. You almost have to get used to when is the trail going to, fall out from underneath me. And that's pretty much what happened. But there's power in the pivot. You and I wouldn't be talking today if MindFit didn't close as a facility. You and I wouldn't be talking today if I didn't have a car accident. I wouldn't be married to my wife and have the kids that I have if I had gone in the military. Right. So
Yeah.
it's really hard at that moment when you have to pivot. But I call it power in the pivot because if you've ever played baseball before, your power when you're in your swing doesn't come from your arms. It comes from the rotation and the pivot of your hips. Right. It's no different in life.
Or golf. Yes.
Yes.
What a great story. I love the power in the pivot, and we face it every day. You just given us the big inflection points, but we face it every single day. And I love that you have this seasoned approach that you seem like a master pivoter now.
Unfortunately, doesn't mean it gets any easier. It just means that you have to start looking a little further ahead in the path.
I'm curious about any reflection or thought you have on when you were running MindFit and then COVID happened. Stressful time for all of us because there was uncertainty afloat everywhere. And you have these people that care about you and about what you offer, and they're asking you to come and do it, but you weren't listening to them then. I'm curious why you weren't listening to them, and have you thought about potentially revisiting that?
I think I was so hell-bent on the perfect image that I had.
Yeah.
I go back to one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid was The Karate Kid. And I love the scene with the bonsai tree with Mr. Miyagi and with Daniel. So,
Yes.
Daniel's intrigued by the bonsai trees. Mr. Miyagi tells him to sit down, gives him a pair of clippers and says, close your eyes. Create a picture in your mind of exactly what you want this tree to look like. Right. And then he says, do you have the picture in your mind? And he says, yeah. He says, now open your eyes and make like picture. Right. That is the blueprint for life. Right. Close your eyes, decide where you want to go. However, there's a caveat to that. What happens when what you're creating doesn't exactly look like your picture? You have to just be okay with it. You have to understand, okay, I'm either okay with this or I'm going to shift. I didn't shift. It was my biggest mistake that I made. Have I thought about going back and revisiting the brick and mortar world? Honestly, no. That was financial devastation for me. I was the sole investor into the company.
Yeah.
And that was great until it wasn't.
Yeah.
So that was really difficult from that standpoint. And I think that, you make mistakes, but understand too, not all mistakes are bad. Sometimes a mistake actually sets you on the path that you want to be on.
Yes. I kind of want to unpack that statement as sometimes the mistake sets you on the path that you want to be on. I would say that every mistake I've ever made has set me somehow on the path that I was meant to be on, whether I wanted to or not. But how do you view mistakes as learning? How do you view mistakes as the necessary check marks you have to do in order to get to where you're headed next?
I actually had a guest on the MindFit Method podcast a couple months ago that kind of gave me a very different perception of failure. And, sometimes mistakes are failure. Sometimes the mistakes are how innovation happens and creativity happens, and it's an actual good thing. Pierce Brantley, I had on the podcast, super cool guy, great entrepreneur. He multiple time best-selling author. And he gave me a viewpoint of failure in a way I've never looked at it before. He actually quantifies failure. So what I mean by that is after he had written his first book, and it was a self-published best-selling book, but he had self-published it, he made a decision that he really wanted to get published by one of the big three. And, instead of, and he's a big data guy, he's a tech guy, instead of trying to figure out what exactly do I have to do to get published by the big three, he took a very different look at it. And he said, how many times for someone that was published by the big three how many times were they on average rejected first? I thought, it's an interesting way to look at it. He found the answer was 30. So on average, for someone who was published by the big three, they were rejected by agents on average about 30 times before they hit it. He got rejected 27 before he hit it, right? What's amazing about that story is that it allows you to say, you know what? I only need to fail 30 times to greatly increase my probability of winning. So even for myself, as I start, a new business or a new program or something like that, how many no's or no answers do I have to get from a sales standpoint to get one sale, right? If you have a $100 product and it takes you 9 no's to get a yes, every one of those no's is actually worth $10, right? Different way to look at it.
Beautiful.
So today, I'm two-parted on mistakes. Number one, I think mistakes are key. I think that failure itself is key. Don't always fail, though, because at some point you are going to want a success, right? You are going to want to do something right. However, here's a caveat to that. I'm getting older, right? And this is something I think about a great deal now. I'm trying to have a relationship with the concept of death. Sounds a little morbid. However, we're not going to be here forever, right? We're here for a finite amount of time, and that's it.
Okay.
So my goal is to make less mistakes because I feel as though the time that I have to make mistakes is less.
Does the goal being less mistakes, does that inhibit the amount of risks that you take in any way? Or is it more of a more calculation into the things you do? Or how does that unpack that, please?
I think it's making me realize that kind of what I said before, don't keep trying to be an expert at everything.
Okay.
Like take the things and the skills and the processes that you're really good at and leverage that. Leverage that so that you may make less mistakes. You're still going to take risk in anything that you do, right? But you may make less mistakes from that standpoint. This way, you are deciding your risk.
All of this from someone who drove a Daytona, who survived that, who came through, who survived business challenge during COVID. Things were going well. They were on the upswing and taken away. And through no fault of your own, things out of your control, swept that away. And now we're here talking to a man who is able to be the master of the pivot. So how can we find out more? Like, where do we find out more about you online, social media, your podcast? Just give us some places that we can connect with you, Mike.
Definitely the podcast. If you type the MindFit Method podcast into any search engine, me and the podcast are going to come up. We're actually getting ready to cross over 150 episodes at this point. We've just about broken the 150,000 download mark, which is awesome. We've been doing it for 2 years. So definitely check out the MindFit Method podcast. On Instagram, I post a great deal there. You can check me out at Mike Fancher Official on Instagram. LinkedIn, Michael Fancher, easy to find. And for a website, for speaking purposes, to learn more about the books, the podcast, you can go to mindfitusa.com.
mindfitusa.com. Fantastic. I don't want to stop talking with you. It's really easy to hear you share these amazing stories. Is there any story or any question I've not asked that you could share with us before we start to wrap up today, Mike? Anything else on your mind you want to hit on?
Yeah, you know what? To this day, one of the things that I hear so often people talk about is imposter syndrome, right? one of the mentors that I truly love is Alex Hermosi. I love his books. You can see one behind my head right up here. And Alex has a very blunt take on imposter syndrome, which is essentially, if you feel like you have imposter syndrome, it's because you're an imposter, because you haven't essentially done the actions that need to be done to be who you say you want to be. I think he's right. I think that's kind of a cool response. But at the same time, I actually witnessed my own version of imposter syndrome just a few months ago. I don't talk about the MindFit world at work. I don't think it's appropriate. So I keep those worlds separate. My job versus my passion, I guess you could say, and what I do with MindFit. And a doctor had to find me at work. I hadn't worked with the doctor for quite a while, so he was trying to get in contact with me. Couldn't get my number. My phone number had changed when I came back from closing MindFit. And he looked me up on Google. And what do you think comes up when you look me up on Google? Everything about MindFit, right?
Yeah.
So he does track me down, catches me in the hallway one day of all places and says, dude, I didn't know you were an author. And my response was fascinating. My response was, well, no, I just wrote 2 books. Right? So to go back to Alex Hermosi's statement of, well, you haven't done the actions if you have that imposter type feeling. No. What I've realized is that for me, obviously, being an author must mean a certain number of books sold or a bestseller status or whatever that is, right? He just said, you're an author. I have the undeniable stack of proof to say that, yes, I am. I've written 2 books, published 2 books, right? So for everyone that's out there today saying, I've, this imposter syndrome, which I feel like imposter syndrome has been like this key fun phrase that everybody throws around today. I don't remember the phrase 10 years ago, but whatever. You can still have done the actions that you have. You still feel like an imposter, but a lot of times it's because it's not about whether or not you are who you say you are. You don't value yourself because you feel as though you haven't hit a certain milestone in whatever you wanted to hit in that. And that's where the imposter syndrome is coming from. But understand, it doesn't mean you're not who you say you are.
That's deep. I'm glad that we took the extra time to unpack that. Thank you, Mike. We have made it to the lightning round here, and I'm about to send you down the rabbit hole. So just get ready.
Let's go.
I'm going to ask you to share between 1 and 3 books that you would recommend to people. 1 and 3. Now, the overachiever might want to share a 4th or a 6th. Try to keep it to 1 to 3. And I know this can be tough because you got a bunch of books on the shelf behind you. So
I got a lot of books there.
What might be 1 to 3 books that you'd recommend and why?
Okay. Loved Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Thought it was a fantastic book. And kind of made me realize, what are you doing all this for? Right? Your why is important. I fall back on it now quite a bit. Whatever the specific thing I'm working on, everyone says that there's one universal why that a person must have. No, actually, there can be multiple because you're working on so many different things in life. That would definitely be one. One of my favorite books that honestly pushed me into entrepreneurship was Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. Absolutely one of my favorite books. In true transparency, a lot of the information that is given in there is actually stuff you probably should not follow. It isn't always the best advice, but it is an unbelievably inspiring book. It does have a lot of very good ideas to be able to move forward. More recently, I'm going to say a pair of books because it's the same author and they're similar, but they're different.
Okay.
But David Goggins' books, Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished, probably 2 of my favorite of all time. Not only have they had an incredible impact on how I view things and how I work to push myself forward, I know they've had an incredible impact for family members, for friends that I have. So those are fantastic. And one of them I just read over the last 2 months. And it was recommended to me by, oh my gosh, the heck was his name? Oh, Matt Drinkon actually recommended the book to me. Oh my God, it's you. Holy crap. Yeah. So when we did our podcast together, you recommended the book Tribe of Millionaires. And I could not finish that book fast enough. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend that one as well. And I appreciate very much the recommendation. I'm going to say those are some of my keys.
Fantastic. Great. A rich library there. And for those watching on YouTube, I mean, just pause and zoom in here and see all the wonderful books that Mike has back here. And I recommend just about every book on the shelf. He's got a great collection here. Thank you for sharing that.
One other that I've just started, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of saving it for an upcoming trip that I have in about a week and a half. But if you guys could just take your eyes and kind of go straight up there.
Yes.
There's one right there. That is Matt's book himself, and I can't wait to read it.
I'm grateful that you have it up there because that's pretty cool to see. The Eternal Optimist, Never Too Late. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks, Mike.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's go to music then. What might be the music that lights you on fire, just it fills your bucket? Any song, genre, artist? Talk about music.
Oh gosh. So music's a big thing for me. I have been a songwriter, a guitar player, and a singer for a very long time. I've been down to Nashville. I've met with recording companies. I've written about 30 songs over my songwriting career. I love to go out and play a gig in a little bar. I did one 2 months ago, I guess. And I can still rock out about a 40-song set, which is pretty cool when I play.
Nice.
I have a lot of fun with that. I love the worlds of rock, hard rock, and country, actually.
Nice.
I can easily go from Garth Brooks to Five Finger Death Punch in a single song. So that is the world that I am definitely usually in. If I'm working out, it's always hard rock, that type of world, new metal, anything like that. But if I'm just into if I'm into the moment, if I'm into the stories, I definitely dive into the country world.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's put a bow on this with the final question. And you have the final word here. This is the Eternal Optimist podcast. When I say Eternal Optimist, what might that mean to you, Mike?
Look forward. Right? We get awfully caught up sometimes in the rearview mirror. Who we were supposed to be, who we weren't. Look forward. Be optimistic, because wherever you are today, whatever you're doing right now, you can change. If there's something that this podcast has taught me in the several years now that I've been doing the podcast, it's that every single person I bump into has three things. Number one, they all have an incredible story. Number two, they generally have an invisible burden that no one sees that they're carrying. And number three, they are an expert at something. Take the opportunities, look forward, and learn from everybody.